And we are live.
Good
How's it
afternoon.
going? Good
Very good.
afternoon. Life is good. I heard you had a relaxing Easter as well before we went
Yeah,
live here.
life is
Good.
good. Sun is shining in the UK, which is very unusual. So really good.
The sun is also shining in Norway now, and it's actually starting to get warm, which is also a little bit unusual in Norway. So I think this is going to be a very good episode. Thanks for joining today, Enrique.
Anytime.
Awesome. So, for the ones that haven't watched Behind the Future before, this is our 11th episode. My name is Henrik, so I've been the host of this program since the start. We also launched this show in the US now, together with my colleague Griffin. But today, I'm speaking to Enrique. We're going to talk about how to make change simple, which of course might get a lot of people thinking that that's going to be very difficult. But it's going to be interesting because we're going to hear about Enrique's experience after a very successful career, and what are some of the principles that he has built up and learned throughout his career for how to ensure a successful transformation. So my first question to you as well, Enrique, is kind of why is change so difficult, just as a starting point?
I think it's not difficult. I think we make it difficult. It's a combination of lack of experience, or maybe politics also play obviously a role. I think we make it complicated. I don't think change needs to be too complicated. If you follow a few rules, it should be simple.
Yep. I like that, and I also agree. I think change is kind of the only constant, to use a very cliche phrase, but
Yeah.
it is kind of more and more important than ever before, both as kind of individuals, but then also as organizations, to build a culture for adoption and change, and how we adopt change in our organizations as well. And what I typically like to kind of start these conversations about as well is to kind of dig into your kind of earlier career and ambitions when you were growing up, and kind of looking back at it, what were some of the first kind of ambitions that you had when you were growing up? What did you want it to be, and where do you want it to be when you were growing up?
Um, I was gonna tell you my first experience where I learned about change and digital transformation. I was only 14, and I learned the power of computers and what they can do for humans. When I was being made redundant at the age of 14 from a weekend job with my uncle, who was a sociologist, and at the time there was no spreadsheets. It was all kind of papers and calculators and doing all the tables manually. So as a young school student, I used to get a few quid from my uncle, helping him with all the donkey work, until he bought the first IBM, one of those white ones. You may remember
Yep.
them. And then I was being made redundant by a spreadsheet, and that was I think I learned the lesson of the power of technology and the power of transformation at that very early age. Um, I didn't think I was going to. I never thought about working in with technology or in technology, and in fact, I started my career as a lawyer, as a corporate lawyer, but I realized that change is so much more fun than law, that I moved into project work, and after I've lived in and worked in two countries, in seven companies, and I've changed career four times, and I love it. Absolutely
Yep.
love it.
I think that's a very good, very interesting as well, because we're going to talk about change today, and a lot of the organizations that we work with as well is kind of, even though we're getting more and more disrupting technology, kind of technology that goes just further and further, it's still about the people, right? And the people still need to have that mindset for change, and they need to understand, the importance of actually making a change. But what I also think is interesting is that you're also kind of a living and breathing example of change yourself, because you have changed careers, you have
Yeah.
worked in different countries, you've been in several companies as well. So, kind of just as an individual, like how do you get that mindset, just from a personal perspective?
I think in this life, and this is what I preach to my kids, you need to do what you like. If you end up doing something you don't like, you don't do it well. The only way to excel is in doing what you like and doing well what you're passionate about. And I am passionate about changing things for the better. I believe, I think I'm probably too old to get involved in the metaverse, yet I am studying and looking into it proper,
Yeah.
because it's very clear that I don't know how far away it is, but it's very clear that directionally that's where we're going, and therefore the key is to keep motivated by the things that you like.
Mm. Maybe the next episode that we're recording together, maybe that's in the metaverse.
Maybe.
That would be interesting. That would be
Yeah.
great. I look forward to that. And but the mindset that you have as well, right? And for me, in my experience and my career so far as well, I know the importance of kind of surrounding yourself with people that you can look up to, kind of kind of role models that you have, both in your personal life, but then also through work, to make sure that you're always working to improve and taking that next step in your life. So, based on the mindset that you have there been any kind of figures or any role models that you have been looking up to that has been helping you and kind of shaped your early career as well?
There always are. I mean, I think the key one for me was a lady called Lindsay Southgate, because she was my boss when I moved to the UK back in 1997, and at the time I was relatively inexperienced, and I was a foreigner. My English was not obviously as good as it is now, and there was an opportunity for a job that nobody thought I could do. Yet she gave me the opportunity, she gave me the support, the mentoring, and I cracked it. And I did a fabulous job, to the point of then getting two promotions very, very quickly, like within 6 months. And the fact that she believed in me, and she was a great leader. She supported. She wasn't, she just believed, and took a leap of faith, and supported. And that's what I try to do in personally with what I've always tried to do with people that have worked for me. Try to, give them the opportunity, give them the support, and hope that it works.
Mm. And I think an important thing of it as well is, kind of leading with example, right? And letting people that, because I've had the same, been fortunate to have the same opportunities here with Ardoq as well. Like having people that, even though I don't have the enough experience or I've been working with similar projects before, they still give you the opportunity to shine. And I think
Mm.
that is so important. And I also know that, having people that also gives you those opportunities are so important. I have Joey in the chat here, who comes with a very good reflection, and that is, of course, in order to make change and accept change, you need to start with yourself. And I
Yeah.
think that's a very good kind of bridge into the next kind of, or the first title, one of your principles after a very successful career, and that's kind of establish the need for change, or find that burning platform, if you will. So how has that been in your experience?
It's critical, and we lie ourselves very often, and we lie ourselves for very many reasons. Sometimes because we've made a decision and then it's a bit embarrassing having to change it, or for me, establishing the need for change is paramount. It's something that often we get wrong. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is, you may have heard this story before, but is the pink wall story, which is, a CEO walks out with a CFO out of the building one night and says, "God, it's so dark here. I wish the walls were pink." So
Mm.
guess what happens when he comes back to the office on Monday? The walls have been painted pink because the guy wanted it. In reality, he didn't. Probably a few more light bulbs or more stronger ones would have been sufficient. Yet
Mhm.
that we've generated a change that was not necessary. And my favorite one is FOMO, fear of missing out. That's becoming an obsession at the executive level. We're all kind of watching over our heads, over our bags. We're watching other people, and at some point it becomes like fear of missing out, the reason for change. And you go like, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. So for me, one of the keys for getting change right is to be honest about the need for change. Now, the thing you don't want to do, of course, is become obsolete, and then
Mhm.
you never change because there will be needs. But there has to be a genuine reason for that change. It has to be It has to be a financial reason, a legal reason. It has to be it's good for the consumers, for the employees. There has to be a real reason. Just the fact that someone else is doing something else is not, for me, is not sufficient enough reason for change. And for me, change is better to do it on a continuous improvement basis as opposed to a revolution. Every country needs a revolution every so often, and every company needs a revolution every so often. But every so often is every so often, not all the time. All the time is continuous improvement. The Japanese call it Kaizen, and it's a principle that I have followed little by little, constantly, every day, trying to improve a little bit, and then before you realize you're changing the environment, but you do it little by little as opposed to a revolution. Humans cannot cope with a revolution every week.
So with the Kaizen principle as well, can you just high level kind of how does that work?
It's by instilling a mentality of continuous improvement in your peers, where you have a team meeting maybe, and then you go around and you ask, what have we improved this week? Or for instance, often, for instance, it's very normal that people keep fixing the same problem over and over and over again, or the same issue, but they don't look at the root cause of the problem to stop the thing becoming an issue in the first place. That for me is continuous improvement. You fix the root cause, and then in the future, the problem happens less and less. But you do it little by little by little, as opposed to every week. Is have that mentality of we're going to improve this bit here, that bit there, as opposed to a big revolution.
Yep. And then you also kind of they talk about the difficult balance between if it ain't broke, we're not going to fix it, versus kind of continuously improving as well. So how do you kind of instill that mentality as well? Like if things are not broken, we should not fix them. Or like we should not spend any time focusing on them.
It's by being that's what I mean by being honest. It's by being ruthless. And if someone comes, it's happened to me many times working as a CIO. Someone comes with a new widget, and my question is, what do you want that widget for? What problem are you trying to resolve? Because is that a solution looking for a problem, or what is it? It's about that. It's about that. It's pushing back. It's not. Sometimes you don't need to change, but sometimes you do, and you need to be very honest, very clear. What's FOMO? What's trendy versus what's important, and then go for the important thing. More support from the organization. It'll be a lot easier.
Yep. And then kind of you can see the title here as well, kind of define the journey before turning on the engine. And one of the questions that I want to start off with is, we know that executive sponsorship is extremely important for any change initiative to be able to create that engagement and kind of ownership and adoption across the organization. But you also need to have those champions, right, working together with you to actually make this a success. So if we start with, let's say, in the role as a CIO, kind of what are some of the things that stakeholders coming to a CIO with any change initiative, what should they have in mind when they come to a CIO to really get their attention and to make sure that this is understandable for the CIO as a starting point?
So for me, it goes back to the need for change. So they need to be absolutely clear. Why are they coming with that? My question, if I had £1 for every time I've asked why in my career, I would be a millionaire. You need to ask the why. And what's really important, projects fail for two reasons, and only two reasons, seriously. 80% of the problem is either the journey has not been defined well and the scope is not defined well, or the sponsor is not ruthlessly determined to make something happen. So, you've asked me at the beginning, why change is so difficult, and when I said we make it difficult, it's because often we just set off. It's like, imagine you go with your family and you travel to northern Norway, and you don't look. Where are you going to? You just keep going with your car. Yeah, that may be a good holiday, but normally people would look at at the other side. Where are you going to go? How are you going to do? Going to get there? What is step we're going to sleep halfway through? Are we going to go by plane, by car? And we forget often. We forget to do all this pre-work, and then we just say going with it. without a very clear vision and a very clear scope. And something else that I would say on scope is, and this is, God, I've seen this so many times, is you must define both what's in a scope and what's out of a scope, because humans will tend to assume that everything is in a scope. So unless you tell them that the plane doesn't have free sandwiches, they'll assume that the plane is with free sandwiches, and they will not buy something in the shop to in terms of sandwiches. Yeah. So you need to,
Yeah,
you need to define both. You need to be very, very clear with the organization. My change is going to deliver this, but it's not going to deliver this unless you want it. But if you want it, it's going to cost you more. It's going to maybe take more time. And
exactly.
that's one of the two things that I see falling. And the other one is the sponsorship. If you are going to sponsor change, you are going to have to be ruthlessly determined to do it or not do it. I've seen many times, an executive gets a project, and he or she doesn't want it, they don't whatever, and they pretend that they do. The thing will just go on forever, and nothing will be delivered. If you're going to be a sponsor in change, just be ruthlessly determined to deliver the change. Otherwise, it may or may not happen. If you respect these two rules, and they're not that difficult, it's just about being honest, then
Yeah.
change becomes half as difficult than if you don't respect these two rules.
Yeah. And then the first thing there as well, like define the journey before you start the engine. I've also been to northern parts of Norway uh, one time when I had a plan, and then other times when I didn't have a plan. And I can say having a plan before you leave is actually the best way to go about it.
It's
But then, exactly. But then on the other side, right, when it comes to that executive sponsor and kind of I also often talk about this, and why it's so important is often that, like, if you don't have, first of all, as an executive, if you don't go all in with the project that you're leading and managing as well, that's also going to be kind of visible for the people that you work with. So if
yes,
they see that leader is not completely kind of adapted into the project, it's why should they bother as well? So like leading with example, I think is very important
it
as an
is.
executive, right?
I love that expression that you've just used, going all in. That's exactly the
Yeah,
mentality that you have to have. If you don't, then you might as well don't start, and don't take the project.
exactly. Yeah,
And on the going back to the scope for a minute, some people have asked me, sometimes, yeah, but it's not always clear where we want to go. And then, yes, it is true that sometimes it's not clear, and that's what you use an agile methodology for change, which is you do bits little by little by little by little by little, but each bit needs to be scoped. There's a
yeah,
fallacy, which is, agile will solve everything. Well, it won't. It just used for less defined projects, but you still have to have a method of work. It's just not good
yeah,
enough to say we're gonna get on. It's very tempting. It's very, and executives love it. Just get on with it. Just get on with it. Well, yes, we will get on with it, but first we need to plan it a bit.
mhm. And then the question then is, if you look at it from the other side, kind of how's that balance between having a perfect kind of picture of where you want to go, and the agile methodology also falls into this, but kind of how do you balance that, right, between having just enough information to make sure that you actually have a plan for the execution of the strategy or the project, but then also being kind of lean enough to actually make changes as you go? Like, how do you balance that?
It's and I know people don't like the word governance because it sounds like bureaucratic. It's not bureaucratic. It is, what you do is you set up. It could be, depending on the stage of the change and depending on where you are, it could be from monthly to daily, but you set a forum in which you discuss the issues and the projects on a regular basis, whatever the regularity is. Sometimes, if you're very early on, it may well be a monthly thing. If you probably more, or at the beginning, if you're not clear, maybe it's a weekly thing where the sponsor can give us steers on where to go, and people can have can help with the thinking. But you do it. What you don't do is you don't send, like King Arthur. You don't send your knights, looking for the Holy Grail, and maybe at some point you'll get them back with it. No, no, no. You need to have, your checkpoints regularly, more or less regular, depending on the stage of the change.
Yeah. I think one of the examples that I had from before as well is that when you, and this is again, right, when you're choosing kind of the A team, if you will, kind of always going for that A team, right? And that's also about having people. This is I've seen this myself as well. Like it doesn't matter what you do, like skills versus the mindset, and skills can be taught to different people, right? But the mindset is very difficult, right? You need to have people that go all in. So from a leader and kind of your perspective as well, how do you find the A team? Just look at it from a leader that is working together with a group of people. How do you find the A team, or how do you make people become the A team?
So yes, great question. Because you may have to make them the A team as opposed to recruit the A team. Um, before we talk about that, I think it's worth highlighting that I've seen it many times. People get appointed because they're available, and that for me is a monumental mistake because the person needs to have the skills. Um, and and the skills, and it depends on the skills. So technical skills can be taught. That's easy, or reasonably easy. Leadership skills are a bit more complicated to teach. I will go always for leadership skills and managerial skills and personal skills, because the technical ones can be taught. Sometimes when I recruit and I look at the CV, I don't even look at whether the person went to uni or not, on what they do at uni. Mind you, I did law and ended up as a CIO, so what do I know?
Yeah.
It's about the skills, and the way to do it is to appoint your A team to the job and then backfill with other people, as opposed to the other way around. Often what I see is there's this change, we'll recruit people for it, and our good people will carry on doing the operation. That's okay, but if the change is important, it could be the difference between you keeping your job and get the next promotion or not. Why would you
Yep.
appoint a team B or a bunch of people that you don't know? So for me, I always get the best people on change. Now, they have to have change skills. They need to, the operators and change agents have complete different mindsets. An operator is typically on the firefighter kind of side of things, very operational, very, while people are probably more on on understanding the impact of change on the different sides of the company, etc., etc.
Yep. And operators, you mentioned this as well. We like that operators are from Mars, and then you have change agents that are from Venus. I
Yes,
think
it's
that's also
true.
very good, like to understand the differences between them as well, and how you
True.
communicate and empower them.
They're
Yeah.
complete different personalities. You mix them up, and you're risking it, because you put an operator to do change, and they'll probably want to do it fast and quick and etc. You put a change person to put the fire off in the operation, and they'll be trying to do stakeholder mapping and whatever when there's a fire. So it's
Exactly.
they're complete different personalities. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we had some good comments in the chat there as well. We have Elmer that change into the better. Totally agree. You have Richard here saying face the world today, accept change and improve from the change. I think that
Yeah.
was almost a little bit poetic. I really like that, Richard. Yassine as well, skill can be taught, will cannot be. I also
Yeah.
totally agree. I think if you don't have the right mindset, it's going to be very difficult to, learn the skills that you need to learn as well if you're not applicable to it. And then also, Chris, totally agree. Totally agree. Like the book by Dr. Carol Dweck as well, like Growth versus Fixed
Correct.
Mindset. I think
Yeah.
that's a must read for everyone wanting to understand people. And then a kind of Angela Duckworth as well in her book, and also her TED talk. Probably many have seen it when it comes to grit. I think that's a very interesting book about who is actually the best performers in any type of field. You see that it's also the ones that goes all in, as we talked about, but also that are willing to continue to do the small things right over a longer period of time and not willing to give
Yeah.
up. So I think this is great. We have Joey here as well. Just have to mention them. Give a shout out to everyone that is tuning in. The operation of a company lies on good leadership. Thanks for the info. That good leaders not just come by appointing them, but goes through the A team. Agree. I see Enrique, you're nodding as well. So you agree?
That's absolutely right. It's
Yep.
For me, it's seriously. Often I've been asked, what's the key to change, and is the ruthless determination of the leader. But that happens with companies as well. I mean, often CEOs are accused of being a bit too ruthless, but hey, sometimes you have to be. Otherwise, things don't happen.
I agree. I agree. And it's so important as well because, at the end of the day, kind of the responsibility is also on the C-level executive to deliver, right? And it's also about finding the best possible possibilities for also empowering the team.
Yeah.
And at least in kind of, I don't have 20 plus experience in my career, but what I've seen already is kind of the people that challenges me and then kind of requires a lot from me, makes me a better person to
Yes.
work within the team as well, because it forces me to improve. And I think a lot of this maybe has also to do with ego, right? Because a lot of people, they don't want to have constructive feedback because it really kind of intervenes with their ego and their self-worth, right?
You
So
need
so
to
how can you change that
park it.
narrative?
You need to park it. I've never had a
Mhm.
problem, and I've seen a couple of people in the list that have worked for me in the past. If they want to,
Fantastic.
I've always parked. There you go.
Yeah.
Is the job, is the project, is the change what's important. And to criticize me for what I'm doing, that's fine. I'll listen to it. That doesn't mean I'm going to do what they say, because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's kind of not a democracy, but you need to listen. You need to listen.
Yeah. The ego is, I think it's so important. I think, and especially like, been looking at it from kind of implementations of Ardoq as well in the organization that I work with, the software that we're delivering, is often like it's all about the people, right? And you see that more and more now when you have gatekeepers or if you have kind of the champions or the people that are actually wanting to drive this change initiative forward, they also have a very strong ability to listen to the people in their organization and then also receive that feedback, constructive feedback,
Yeah.
and kind of leaving ego at the door when they walk into the office.
There
Yeah,
is
and
an
by the way,
element.
I agree.
There's an element of ego, because at the end of the day, you want the title, and you want the salary, and you want to be first in implementing something, and there is an element of ego, but it cannot be the driving force. The driving force has to be the good of the community, the good of the company, the good of the employees. It has to be the purpose, not the ego.
Exactly. And the next point on that list as well is also, watch out for the fifth columnist. What do you mean by that?
So the fifth columnists were in the Second World War. The fifth columnists were French kind of guerrilla people that used to, yeah, uh, disturb the Nazi forces when they invaded France by being hidden and producing guerrilla work. And what I mean is just a metaphor for often often you need to watch out for stakeholders that you think are they're not. And unfortunately, humans kind of work a little bit like that. So this is people that you think they're with you, but they're not. And there's a number of symptoms that I always say, things to watch out for. Is little things like his body language. Is little things like all of a sudden someone starts to not attend meetings. One of your peer executives that was there at the beginning, all of a sudden is always too busy to be there, or kind of they withdraw from you in the corridors and the water machine, or they, a good one is testing questions. Like they ask you really really difficult questions for stuff that is obvious or things that they've never asked before. Um, Following up on actions in meetings, often people that become fifth columnists will never follow up on the actions assigned to them in meetings, and then the project cannot progress because they're not acting and gossip is another one. You hear all of a sudden you're in the kitchen and you hear someone saying, I didn't know that your project had this problem. And you're like, hang on, your project doesn't have this problem. What's going on? And it's pure gossip trying to destabilize you, if you like.
Yeah.
That's a really important one. If you don't watch out for these fifth columnists, they will bring trouble. And
Yeah.
every big organization, maybe I'm also influenced by the fact that I've mainly worked in big organizations, there will always be an element of this.
And I can also I can imagine the politics when organizations becomes bigger as well.
Yeah.
But how do you navigate that kind of? We can look at it from several examples, but let's say start with as an executive. Like, how do you navigate those type of internal kind of maybe hurdles or challenges, right? That you need to build the A team, you need to get people together. How do you navigate that?
It's talking to people, talking. I always say to my mother that I don't know how on earth I've ended up with a job that requires me to speak for 10 hours a day in a foreign language. But it is true, is, that your role as a CIO or as a change leader is to talk to people, talk to people. Make sure they're still with you. Make sure that your own people are still with you. Make sure that the risks are covered. Make sure that it's just talk. And keep making sure that everyone is still with you, that you haven't lost them kind of three stops behind.
Yep. And then also as a let's say as if you're a part of a team, I also know that is talking to people and actually making sure that they're aligned and they're working towards the same mission. But probably there's a lot of people listening in here as well that maybe have aspirations to become a C-level executive. They might want to become an IT director, a CIO or CTO, maybe even a CEO, and kind of what should they do in order to kind of make sure that they're also preparing for a career as a C-level executive, and when they're actually embarking on the change project together with the team, what are some of the skills that they should develop in this field as well?
It's funny because it kind of goes back to that ego thing. If you have too much ego, you may not make it, funny enough, because you may become a little bit of a problem. I think it's about learning. It's about choosing a good boss that you can learn from. That my last boss in Tesco was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I learned so much from him. It's choosing a good. I couldn't have done my first CIO job without the learnings from that other job, which was not even in IT. I think it's choosing a good boss. Make sure that your manager is a really good individual that will invest in you and will have the skills to do the job, and then just like a sponge kind of absorb and follow as much as you can. It's like kids. It's about learning. It's about replicating behavior.
Yep. One thing that I wanted to ask you as well is we know the responsibility when you probably heard this as well, like extreme ownership, right? By Joe Wilco as well, when he talks about like ownership comes from all angles. It comes from the top, it comes from the bottom, it comes from sideways, right? Like everyone has a responsibility to make sure that everyone is progressing and developing as kind of as a team and then also as individuals. But if you look at the ownership from, let's say you have a boss or you have a kind of a leader that you want to talk to, you want to explain what is important for you in order to develop. How can you go about having that conversation with your CIO, for example, in order to make sure that they're put in the position of
Just
succeeding?
making, just discussing it plainly. Every
Okay.
time I've moved jobs, I've had a chat with my boss saying, "Look, I'm getting a bit stuck in here. I may be looking for another job," and then it becomes a non-surprise. It becomes and sometimes you're surprised because then he or she says, "Actually, why don't we change these, or why don't you move you to some other place, or why don't you?" And then you're learning again. I think it's about honesty, and it's the same as we said at the beginning about the honesty for change. This is the same. It's about having an honest conversation.
Yep. That's noted. I'm going to take that with me to the leader now. So the next thing that I wanted to ask, and like the final thing here as well, is one of the things which is so important as well, and I think also often underrated when you go about a change project in itself, and that's kind of going into bed with finance. Well, maybe not literally, but I think the way to express it is really good. Like, what do you mean by going into bed with finance?
Yeah, well, up to you if it's literally or not. For me, the finance is critical. So at the end of the day, the second most important job in every country, absolutely every country, if you ignore the head of state, the second most important job is always the chancellor or the ministry of economy, depending on countries. And it's because finance is critical. They are the owners of the budgets, and they are more importantly, they're the owners of the cash flow. and often, you are going to be impacting on budgets, and you're going to be impacting on cash flow, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. Sometimes you're going to need a couple of million for something that will not return the investment in 3 years. That means that you all of a sudden producing a 2 million gap in and potentially in cash flow. So you need to do this with finance, and it's better to go into bed with them early on and make sure that they're part of your change, and make sure that there are financial plans that wrap the change. And there's many ways to put something like this together. There's from regulatory reasons to audit findings. You've got in big organizations, you've got what I call multipliers, which is sometimes you have a little change in one corner, but because you've got so many employees or so many sites or whatever, then all of a sudden it's millions and more millions. But it's important that they go with you hand by hand. It's really, really important. Some people kind of, don't worry about finance, we'll be all right. Well, no, you won't, because at some point there'll be questions about the budget and the cash flow.
Yeah, you mentioned something about it, but how do you build a successful business case when presenting this to finance as well?
I think I always look at the company strategy and the politics. So there'll be a company strategy. If what you're trying to do goes against it, forget it. So you need to go with it. If the company strategy is to expand abroad, then that may be a good way of landing a business case. Your project is going to be facilitating the international expansion, or sometimes is expense savings or cost avoidance. They're complete different things, by the way. I've seen so many business cases where people mix up expense savings and cost avoidance. Some companies don't like cost avoidance as a principle. And you can have income creation, or you can have reasons for competition, or even here is when you may be able to use FOMO, as a way of getting something approved. Audit. I know this is naughty, but I'm going to say it anyway. Sometimes I've called up internal audit to help me make a case because something is not quite right. I don't know, cybersecurity or GDPR. Typically, stuff like something is not quite right, and just trying to justify it as an individual is difficult. But if you've got an auditor behind you, then it becomes a much more powerful argument.
Yeah, and it's also about like people, if they're not experiencing a crisis, or at least if they don't feel that this is something that they actually need to do, like they might also have difficulties actually understanding why it's important to change as well. So that's kind of those cycles of actually creating some friction as well, to actually make sure that they see that there is a challenge, right?
But also, finance is not infinite. But money is, so often a CEO will have to make choices and dilemmas, because the money is the money. It's like you and your bank account. That's all you have. So you're gonna have to make choices between going out for dinner or paying for another jumper or whatever. It's a stupid example, but it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're competing with other people, and you need to, and it's difficult sometimes to get that finance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine as well, and then especially with the larger organizations when you have politics into the mix as well, because everyone might be you might be working towards the same thing, but they might have different interest areas as well. And then, of course, the last thing, which I also think is really important, and we have seen this ourselves as well, is kind of breaking down the larger problems or the larger change initiatives as well into tangible and concrete practical steps to help you get started, but then also to outline a plan. So kind of, I think it's really important to make sure that you're breaking it into different stakeholders, interests and focus areas. But how would you go about that as well? How would you break it down into tangible, practical steps to execute on?
So two things. The first one is, you make always a difference between people, process, and technology. They are three complete different things, and often they're wrapped up as the one thing. Three different kind of skills, three different ways, and if you just do one and don't do the other two, you're gonna fail. If you implement a new mobile app and you don't think about how people are going to use it and how does it work out with the rest of the processes in the organization, you're going to get stuck.
Yep. I think
Sorry,
did. Oh,
you
sorry,
don't
Enrique,
think
I lost you there for a
about
second.
the,
Sorry, I lost you there for a second. What did you? What
yeah,
was
I
the
don't
last
know
thing you
why.
said?
So I was saying that you need to make a difference between people, process, and technology, and you need to
Yep.
make sure that the three. You need to split any change in those three, and you need to make sure what are you going to do about the people, because at the end of the day, it's all about the people. What are you going to do about the current processes and the future ones, and what are you going to do about the technology to support it? And often we only think about one of them. The operators will just think about process. The HR people will just think about people, and the technologies will only think about, sorry, they won't, but it's a risk that they will only think about technology. And the other thing I always
Yep.
do is when planning change, there's two type of tasks. You've got sequential tasks and you've got parallel tasks. And very inexperienced project managers and change agents tend to go for sequential, and then the change goes forever, people get bored, and then it never gets delivered. And the secret is to try to chunk it and then put things back into a parallel, in doing them in parallel with other things, because then you're shortening the overall length. And it's a skill that takes time to develop, but it's absolutely critical for me. Now, this is chunking the elephant is the third one for me. We've talked about the scope, we've talked about the ruthless the ruthless sponsor. For me, the third one is chunking the elephant. I've seen so many times people increasing the scope instead of decreasing it. That is phenomenal.
Yep.
It's like this change is already difficult, yet you're asking me to do another three things. Of course, with the same amount of money and the same amount of people, and no more time. What's going to happen? Quality will get compressed, and the thing will be done in a rush. We need to protect, we need to defend the scope with our life, or be able and big enough to renegotiate, money and time.
And the last step that I've written down today as well, which I also think is so important, and that is don't stop when the project is delivered. And like Joe Shannon is director of technology and design at Ordnance Survey as well. She has this saying which I really like, and that's kind of preparing for the final, kind of the last change, like preparing for continuous change.
Yeah.
We're kind of going towards, or going from a kind of project-driven organization towards a capability-driven organization. And I think this is so important and so underrated as well. It's like you see that projects that have a deadline, they always go out of date, or sorry, out of time. And kind of how do you make that shift as well to make sure that it's not just another project, but it's actually a way of working, improving the organization?
It's really difficult because we want to move to the next thing. People in the project by then will be probably a bit tired of it, and the business will be probably a bit tired of it. But the risk is that they'll undo very quickly everything that they were doing through all those weeks or months. For me, it's consciously either keep the project in place for a little bit longer, or maybe downsize the project team, but keeping someone there responsible for implementing the change and doing it through measures. So instead of just saying, we've implemented this, is how has that changed our key performance indicators or our key measures? And until that achievement, I don't know, imagine that the business case is will improve by 10% people's productivity. Let's measure the productivity as opposed to just talk about the project is done. No. Measure the productivity. Make sure that the 10% is achieved. Don't stop until it is achieved. And if you need to put back a few more people because something is not going quite right, then do it. And then don't let them go until the 10% is achieved.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So the last thing now is, because over a very successful career as well, you also have a book that is coming out as well. Where we're actually talking more about these principles
Yeah.
that people can learn more about. Can you just give a quick walkthrough of the book and what it's about?
Yeah, it's so I call it the 10 Commandments for change. And it's literally because I think there are 10 rules that the more you bypass and ignore, the more, the more far away you place yourself from success. And it'll just be a bunch of, it's on the back of, it'll be a small book, and it'll just be designed for executives, maybe for people working for executives, with a few tips and hints that I have learned through my career, stuff that if not will give you problems in when implementing change.
Yep. Amazing. We will also make sure that we share more information about that in the episode description as well. Are there, just final question for me, are there any other question or any other books or resources that you have read throughout your career that you would recommend for the people tuning in to check out?
I don't know if you've seen this one. Where is it? Where's the camera? Here it is.
There. Who Moved
This
My
is
Cheese? Yeah.
This is my most favorite book ever. It is quite old. It is only 80 something pages, 93 pages in font 14, and it changed my life. At some point when I was relatively young in my career, I was really stuck with a piece of change, and this just released the solution, and the solution was in me, like it always is. Yeah, and it wasn't.
Yep.
It was a mentality problem as opposed to an external barrier or anything. And I would thoroughly recommend this book, especially if you've got younger people in the team which are going through a bit of a self-doubt and whatever. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
So who stole my cheese? Is there yeah, people need to figure out what that actually means.
Who moved my cheese? Yeah.
Who moved my cheese? That's okay. That's noted. I will check that out as well. It seems very interesting. But Enrique, thank you so much for joining today's episode. It's been great having you on. I'm just gonna kind of take the final opportunity now to, if there's any questions in from the audience, feel free to write that in the chat. If not, we will follow up with the resources that we mentioned today, all the books that we talked about, the 10 principles or the commandments of as well for successful change. But until next time, it's been great having you on today's show, Enrique. I hope it was a great experience for you as well.
Thank you for having me. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and hope you have a great week and enjoy the sun.